Hari Om. Welcome to the Pravachana Malika talk number 24. Today our talk is on understanding food for safety and health. And we're excited to invite our keynote speaker for the day, Professor Kantha Channaiah, who is the Assistant Professor, Division of Food Nutrition Exercise Sciences at the University of Missouri, Columbia, USA. So we will start today with our Veda Kusumanjali, and then we have a Sangeetanjali, and Dr. Prabhakar will introduce the speaker, and we have a keynote talk along with concluding remarks by Srimati Sandhya and vote of thanks by N. Prasad. So we'll now do the Veda Kusumanjali. Vasan sir, please.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Om Bhadram Karnevi Shunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabir Yajatraha Stirai Rangai Tushtvagum Sastanubihi Veshema Deva Hitan Yadayuhu Swastina Indro Vruddhashavaha स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ अग्नेनया सुपथाराये अस्मान् विश्वानि देव वयुनानि विद्वान् योऽध्यस्मा जुहुराणमेनो भूयिष्ठान्ते नममुक्तिं विधेम ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ आप्यायन्तु ममाङ्गानि वाक् प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमतो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदम् माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मामा ब्रह्म निराकरोतु अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तद आत्मनि निरते य उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ यश्छन्दसा मृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽद्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया स्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवदारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कन्नाभ्यां भूरिविष्टृवं ब्रह्मणा कोशोऽसि मेधया अपि हितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ पूर्णमदा पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ अन्नं न निन्द्यात् तद्व्रतं प्राणो वा अन्नं शरीरमन्नादम् प्राणे शरीरं प्रतिष्ठितं शरीरे प्राणः प्रतिष्ठितः तदेतदन्नमन्ये प्रतिष्ठितं स एतदन्नमन्ये प्रतिष्ठितं वेद प्रतिष्ठति अन्नमानन्नादो भवति महान् भवति प्रजया पशुभिः ब्रह्मवर्चसेन महान् कीर्त्या अन्नं न परिचक्षीत तद्व्रतम् आपो वा अन्नं ज्योतिरन्नादम् अप्सु ज्योति प्रतिष्ठितं ज्योतिष्याप प्रतिष्ठिताः तदेतदन्नमन्ये प्रतिष्ठितं स एतदन्नमन्ये प्रतिष्ठितं वेद प्रतिष्ठति अन्नमानन्नादो भवति महान् भवति प्रजया पशुभिः ब्रह्मवर्चसेन महान् कीर्त्या अन्नं बहुकुर्वीत तद्व्रतं पृथिवी वा अन्नम् आकाशोन्नादः पृथिव्यामाकाशा प्रतिष्ठितः आकाशे पृथिवी प्रतिष्ठिता तदेतदन्नमन्ये प्रतिष्ठितं स य एतदन्नमन्ये प्रतिष्ठितं वेद प्रतिष्ठति अन्नमानन्नादो भवति महान् भवति प्रजया पशुभिः ब्रह्मवर्चसेन महान् कीर्त्या ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ तत्सत्.
Thank you very much, Vasan sir. So now we'll have the Sangeetanjali. Dr. Kantha, can you play the Sangeetanjali by Surita?
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
No.
No? Okay, how about now?
Yeah, we can see now.
Okay.
So you have enabled the audio, right, when you shared the screen?
I think so.
You can try again. You can unshare and then share it again. Make sure you check the audio.
No, I checked it, let me play
Okay,
this.
good. Then
It should be okay. Let me know if there is any issues.
We are not hearing yet, just in case.
So
I'll
it
start
started, right? It started, right?
Yeah,
It got paused.
no, yeah, we can't hear any sound from the
Really?
slide. Yeah.
How to enable the sound, Prasad? Do you have any?
So when you do the share screen,
Mhm.
there will be a small checkbox at the bottom which will say share audio. You just have to check that before you share the screen.
Okay, let me do it again.
So there'll be like share sound at the bottom. When you click share screen, there should be a share sound box.
I got it.
Check.
Shri Gauri Sutta Vigna Vinashaka Tava Charanam Om Gananatha Shri Gauri Sutta.
Yeah, it was working. It just stopped.
Vigna Vinashaka Tava Charanam Namami Shankara Sutta Vignesha Namami Shankara Sutta Vignesha Girijatanaya Tava Charanam Girijatanaya Tava Charanam Om Gananatha Shri Gauri Sutta Vigna Vinashaka Tava Charanam Mushika Vahana Modaka Priya Shri Mushika Vahana Modaka Priya Shri Munijana Vandita Tava Charanam Om Gananatha Shri Gauri Sutta Vigna Vinashaka Tava Charanam Karimukha Varada Kamika Falada Karimukha Varada Kamita Falada Shri Gajavadana Tava Charanam Om Gananatha Shri Gauri Sutta Vigna Vinashaka तव चरणं विघ्नविनाशक तव चरणं विघ्नविनाशक तव चरणं. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you for Sunita for that wonderful melodious rendering. Next, I'd like to request my father, Dr. Prabhakar, to introduce the speaker.
Gita slokas.
You can introduce and I'll pull it up.
Okay. So we have today Professor Kantha Channaiah, and he's a discovery for me. But of course, Prasad knows him earlier, but when we met in the temple, in our conversation, we could know that he belongs to Bangalore, Karnataka, and got his studies in Bangalore and got PhD also in the NIMHANS, and improved the qualification and experience in all directions. And so he's good. Then I thought, how not you give a talk in our Veda Adhyayana Kendra and Waves Bangalore chapter meet, which will have monthly meet. And so he readily said, yes, I will give it. So today he is just going to talk to us on the understanding food for safety and health. These are the safety and health are the two important things which will guard our life and take us up to the full life, Purnayus. It is said to be 100 Satamanam Bhavati, 100 years. Satam means Purnam, means that whatever is the length of life or span of life given to us, it must be fruitful and useful and contributory and substantial. Therefore, this kind of opportunity we can enjoy when we can have the selection of the food for safety and health. And moreover, on the screen here, our professor has shared so many items kept on the table, and it is up to the choice and health and limitations of the stomach, not the tongue. Tongue, looking at that, wants everything to be tasted, but you should be really discretional enough. That's exactly, that discretion is important. Tongue is a indriya, Jnanendriya, and stomach is the Paramatma. So keep your view upon the Paramatma when you think of your indriya working. Jihva, chapalyam they call it. So the tongue tells you fickleness, that you can do this, you taste that, and all that. But we should always have these two, safety and health, as our goals. And we have already in Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a Anna Suktam, where so many cautions have been given to us. And Annam Naparichatshita also. That means you should not waste food. People, as we are seeing, there are so many people who will waste more food. Eating is less, wasting is more. But that should not happen, because food is one man's food extra, maybe another man's filling up the stomach. Therefore, Annavan Annado Bhavati, Mahan Bhavati, Mahan Kirtya. That's really nice. So anybody who has got Annam, who shares food to others, and he will be really getting better lokas, and he will become great, and so on. So not much talking about the food. And moreover, we have to understand, for understanding of the food, these days, we have a lot of opportunity and scope, because any item you take up, there is the formula printed, so much of potassium, so much of protein, so much of and cholesterol free or sugar or salt. But in the olden days, you observe no such type of thing. Simply go, buy, cook, eat. So they were all very much healthier than now. So now your choice and scope to understanding is more nowadays. But apart from that, the ghee, the clarified butter, is the only one, they simply say natural product. There is nothing like potassium, this and all that. So there are some such Indian natural foods which have not got any formulas to be written or printed on the box or thing. So anyway, that means they're all quite good for safety. For example, clarified butter is a good thing for safety and health. So with these few words, not talking much about it, now we have got another two people, Sandhya and Prasad, who are also participants here to offer at the end the conclusion remarks and all that. So not talking much, let us listen to Dr. Kantha. And meanwhile, we have got our Jyotir Aditya, a student of our Kendra in Bangalore. He has by hearted the entire Bhagavad Gita, and I asked him to choose a few slokas, about 10 or so, from Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna also talks about the kitchen, talks about the taste, and also the choice. So if you want that, he just makes a different sattva, rajas, and tamo aharas, and let's listen to him. Play, please.
सप्तदशोऽध्यायः श्रद्धात्रयविभागयोगः अर्जुन उवाच ये श्रद्धविधिमुत्सृज्य यजन्ते श्रद्धयान्विताः तेषां निष्ठा तु का कृष्ण सत्त्वमाहोरजस्तमः श्रीभगवानुवाच त्रिविधा भवति श्रद्धा देहिनां स स्वभावजा सात्विकी राजसी चैव तामसी चेति तां शृणु सत्त्वानुरूप सर्वस्य श्रद्धा भवति भारत श्रद्धामयोऽयं पुरुषो यो यच्छद स एव सः यजन्ते सात्विकान् देवान् यक्षरक्षांसि राजसाः प्रेतान् भूतगणांश्चान्ये यजन्ते तामसा जनाः शास्त्रविहितं घोरं तप्यन्ते यो तपोजनाः दम्भाहङ्कारसंयुक्ताः कामरागबलान्विताः कर्षयान्तः शरीरस्थं भूतग्राममचेतसः मां चैवातशरीरस्थं तान् विद्यासुरनिश्चयान् आहारस्त्वपि सर्वस्य त्रिविधो भवति प्रियः यज्ञतपः ततः दानं तेषां भेदमिमं शृणु आयुस्सत्त्वबलारोग्य सुखप्रीतिवर्धनाः रस्य स्निग्धा स्थिरः हृदय आहारस्वात्विकप्रियाः कट्वाम्ललवणत्युष्ण तीक्ष्णरूक्षविधाहिनः आहारराजसस्येष्टा दुःखशोकमयप्रदाः यातयामं गतरसं पर्युषतं च यत् उच्छिष्टमपि चामेध्यं भोजनं तामसप्रियं विधिहीनमसृष्टान्नं मन्त्रहीनमदक्षिणं श्रद्धाभिरहितं यज्ञं तामसपरिचक्षते देवद्विजगुरुप्राज्ञा पूजनं शौचमार्चवं ब्रह्मचर्यमहिंसा च शारीरं तप उच्यते यज्ञे तपसि दाने च स्थितिः सदति चोच्यते कर्मा चैव तदर्थीयं सुधित्येवाभिधीयते अश्रद्धया हुतं दत्तं तपस्तप्तं कृतं च यत् असदित्युच्यते पार्थ न च तत्प्रेत्यो नो इह ओम तत्सदिति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे श्रद्धात्रयविभागयोगो नाम सप्तदशोऽध्यायः।
Yeah. Dr. Kantha, please continue with this presentation.
Yeah, sure. Prasad, can you see my screen?
No, I had overridden it for the Gita. So please share again.
Can you see my screen?
Yep, you can see it.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Prabhakar. Thank you, Dr. Prasad, for this opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. This is Kantha Channaiah, Assistant Professor at Food Science, University of Missouri, Columbia, Missouri. I'm a food microbiologist, and my research focuses on food safety and process validation to control common foodborne pathogens like Salmonella, sugar toxin producing E. coli, and Listeria monocytogenes. When it comes to food safety, these three are the most important pathogens. And how to control these things to make sure that finished food is safe. And that's the core aim of my research. And also I work on molecular characterization of antibiotic resistant and virulent foodborne pathogens from livestock settings. So this is about my expertise, my background. In today's topic, understanding food safety and health, I'll try my level best to provide basic information about, the bacteria, fungi or molds. In America, we call it as molds. In India and, Asian subcontinent, we use the term fungi. And I'm going to talk about the importance of viruses, and its relation to food safety. And finally, I'm going to talk about how these microbes play an important role in maintaining good health, particularly in humans. And also, if something goes wrong because of our diet habits and other bad habits, how the microorganisms inside our body changes, and subsequently it leads to so many disorders or diseases. So I'm excited for this opportunity to talk about the importance of food safety in relation to human health. Okay, here is the agenda of my presentation. First, I will talk about the bacteria. Primarily, when it comes to microorganisms, bacteria play a very important role, major role. So that's why I'm going to talk more about bacteria, the type of bacteria based on the temperature and factors that affects bacterial growth. That's very important. In my opinion, although all these things are, basic information, I think these are very essential information, and it's important to understand what are the factors that favors the bacterial growth. Then we're going to talk about how the bacteria will grow, because in microbiology the growth is relatively a different term compared to humans and other animals. And then we're going to talk about identification of bacteria. Then we'll move to fungi kingdom. We'll talk about the importance of fungi and molds and mycotoxins. And then we talk about the importance of the viruses. I'm going to provide some introduction to viruses. And then we're going to talk about microbes and human health, food that favors a healthy microbiome, and finally, summary. And we will finish off my presentation, my session with a Q&A session. So I'll begin my presentation with bacteria. I'm going to take back to you guys to the 17th century. Bacteria were unknown to people until the 17th century. Bacteria were first observed by Antony van Leeuwenhoek, a businessman and scientist from Netherlands in 1676. Using a single lens microscope of his own design. So he is a businessman and used to travel in ship, and he has a lot of free time. So out of curiosity, he developed, he invented his own microscope, and out of curiosity used to observe the contaminated waters and other liquids, and later he found some tiny living creatures, and that's where all this microbiology world started. And that's the reason why he's called the father of the microbiology. So these bacteria are very tiny in shape, single-celled organisms, and you need a microscope to see these bacteria, and usually like 0.2 to 2 micron in width and up to 1 to 3 micron. Sometimes in rare cases you find up to 5 microns in length, and these are ubiquitous in nature. That means you can find these in water, in air, in soil, and millions. Right now millions and millions on your body right now. Even we carry a lot of bacteria in our body, and that's the whole topic of today's presentation: how these bacteria are beneficial to human health, and how to maintain the good microbiome. Collectively the microbes present in our body is called as microbiome, and we're going to talk about how to maintain a healthy microbiome. That's very important. Eating habit, that plays a very important role. And in general, although most of these bacteria are useful, most of these bacteria, sometimes when people say bacteria, we always think about, these are pathogens, are not good. In fact, most of the bacteria are very useful. They play a very good role, significant role in nature, in ecosystem, in recycling nutrients, and also in maintaining good health in our body. But only a few are, pathogenic in nature, and that's where we get diseases. And we're going to talk about those things in the next couple of slides. So let's learn more about bacteria. And as I mentioned, these are like a single-celled organisms. And unfortunately, these lack a nuclear membrane. But in bacteria, all the genetic information similar to humans is stored in DNA. Of course, it's a small, tiny DNA, single loop of DNA. And when it comes to bacteria, when we say growth, it's not about size. In humans and animals and plants, we always refer growth in terms of increasing the size, right? But in bacteria, that's not correct. In bacteria, the growth means the duplication of bacteria. Usually it uses the phenomenon called binary fission. After reaching certain stage, it will start dividing the cells into 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. It's a logarithmic growth. So that's how we call it as, the growth in case of microbiology. It's not about the size, it's about the number of bacterial cells that keep on increasing. And in microbiology, when we say, there is no growth, that means we are arresting the multiplication of bacteria. That's the big success actually. In case if you want to control any bacterial growth, even if there are 1 or 2 bacteria, that's okay. Usually in most cases, they don't cause any harm unless and until they reach a good number, then they produce toxins and leading to diseases in humans and animals. So what do bacteria look like? Based on their shape, bacteria are predominantly classified into rod-shaped called bacilli, round-shaped called cocci, and spiral-shaped. And most of the bacterial species are either spherical or rod shapes. Usually these are like, 2 common shapes, like a rod shaped and, the round or cocci shape bacteria. But some are like, different shape. For example, Vibrio are shaped like slightly curved rods. And that's why the name, the spiral. So in general, the bacteria can exist as a single cells, in pairs and chains and or in clusters. In most cases, they live in clusters and groups. And now let's understand the factors affecting microbial growth. Particularly we're going to talk about the bacterial growth. And the most important factors that affect the bacterial growth and multiplications are described under the acronym FAT-TOM. FAT-TOM stands for food, acidity, time, temperature, oxygen, and moisture. For example, the food, food plays a very important role. Like humans, bacteria needs food. Like all living organisms, bacteria need food for its growth and multiplication. And you can control the growth of bacteria by limiting the food availability. Hence, proper cleaning and sanitation is very critical, not only in food industry, even at home. The cleaning and sanitation play a very, very important role. If you limit the food availability to bacteria, then you are achieving a big success. That means, there is no bacterial growth happening. And that's good actually to avoid cross contamination. Number 2 factor is acidity. The pH of food plays an important role. For example, foodborne pathogens, thrives well at a neutral pH. Similar to humans, they love a neutral pH like 5.5 to 7.5. But below 4.5, most of the bacteria cannot survive. That's the secret of a recipe. If you bring down the pH to below 4.5, definitely the most of the bacteria cannot survive, and you can increase the shelf life of food products. And number 3 is time. And bacterial multiply fast at a room temperature. Similar to humans, room temperature, we always like room temperature, right? Similarly, bacteria like room temperature, like 25-degree temperature. So that's the reason, sometimes the perishable foods like milk, we need to keep it in refrigerated. If you keep it outside, if you start abusing food, like the time, and then it's going to get spoiled. So time also plays a very, very important role. If you provide food, if you provide right pH and also the good amount of time, the bacteria will start multiplying and it can lead to contamination of the food products. And number 4 is the temperature. Right temperature is very, very important. And the most foodborne pathogens, can grow in temperatures between maybe 15 to 35 degrees. That's the most favorable temperature for bacteria. That's the reason we always say that, either, keep it low, in refrigerated conditions, below 4 degrees Celsius or 40 degrees Fahrenheit to make sure that, food is safe. And the 5th one is oxygen. The most of the bacteria are aerobic in nature, like humans, they are like aerobic in nature. That means they need oxygen to survive. But at the same time, some bacteria like Clostridium botulinum, they don't need oxygen to survive and growth. Like absence of oxygen provides a perfect microclimate for those bacteria. So we have to be careful, based on the risk analysis. If the risk analysis says that Clostridium botulinum is the main pathogen, then providing a tight, airtight condition, favors the growth of bacteria. So that's another important thing I wanted to share here. And the last one is moisture. Moisture plays a very, very important role. Because moisture is needed for the growth and survival of bacteria. I'll give you some example. A high moisture food product spoils quickly compared to low moisture food product. For example, wheat flour. Wheat flour has less water, and that's why you can store the wheat grains and wheat flour for longer duration of time. So that's one of the thing, if you reduce the moisture, I think in India, it's pretty common, to dry it in under the sun to make sure that, the food can be kept for a longer period of time. So that's one of the reasons. That basic principle is they're reducing the moisture so that we can increase the shelf life of food products. So now let's look at how we classify bacteria based on the temperature. In general, bacteria can thrive in a wide range of temperature, but predominantly we classify bacteria into 3 different categories: thermophiles, mesophiles, and psychrophiles. Thermophiles are the bacteria that thrives at a high temperature, more than 50 degrees Celsius, or 110 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. And usually, they are not of much use to us, but, sometimes, post cook step, they might survive and they can cause, problem to the food safety. So usually these are not much, important when it comes to the human health, but mesophiles are the predominant one because they, similar to humans, they they love the medium temperature, like like 15 degree to 35 degree, and these are the ones that causes a lot of issues, health related issues, food spoilage, and human diseases. And psychrophiles are the another different categories of bacteria. They love cold and low temperature. For example, Listeria monocytogenes, that's another bacteria, and they like the refrigeration temperature. In case if Listeria is the pathogen of concern based on the risk analysis, then keeping the food in refrigerator will not help, because they love cold temperature, cold weather, and they still start growing and multiplying, can cause diseases. And also based on the the pH requirement, bacteria can be classified into 3 different categories, like acidophiles, neutrophiles, and alkaliphiles. As the name indicates, acidophiles means acid loving. That means grow at very low pH, like below 5.4, lactobacillus. And the neutrophiles grow at 5.4 to 8. Most of the foodborne pathogens comes under this category. And alkaliphiles are alkali pH loving bacteria with the pH 7 to 11.5. And very rarely we find these bacteria, for example, Vibrio cholera and Alkaligens fecalis, where they have the optimal pH of 9 and above. So at the same time, based on the oxygen requirements, bacteria has been classified into 4 different categories. Obligate aerobes, that means they cannot survive without oxygen. They need oxygen. So if you create a airtight environment, they will die. For example, Pseudomonas is one good example. And the number 2 is facultative anaerobes. That means can use oxygen, but can grow in its absence. This is a very tricky bacteria, like E. coli and Staphylococcus. If you have oxygen, no problem. They will start multiplying, they grow. And also, if you remove oxygen, also they can survive. They'll change their respiration mode, and that's why it's called facultative anaerobes. And there's something called obligate anaerobes. Cannot use oxygen and are harmed by the presence of toxic forms of oxygen. So if you put oxygen, they're going to die. For a very good example is Clostridium botulinum. Usually in canned food, you might have seen some canned food, which is not very common in India, but we have a lot of canned food in USA. And usually it's airtight container, and that provides a very good climate condition for Clostridium botulinum. But in case if there is any issues from cross contamination, it can start producing toxin, and it's a neurotoxin. So it can create a deadly poisoning, leading to some human health issues. And also we have something called microaerophils. And this requires oxygen, but very little amount of oxygen. And example is Campylobacter. So these are some of the basic informations about bacteria, and definitely all these informations are useful in making sure to have a good food without any cross contamination. So this chart shows the growth requirements of important bacterial pathogens associated with food products. As you can see, the left-hand side, you have the list of bacterial pathogens and the temperature for growth and pH and the water activity. Water activity plays a very, very important role in bacterial growth and survival. As you can see, the most bacteria cannot survive below 4.5 pH. So above 4.5 pH, most of the bacteria can survive. And at the same time, you can see that the most of the bacteria, except Staph aureus, requires more than 0.92 water activity. So if you decrease the water activity, then you are achieving a big success in terms of arresting the growth and multiplication of bacteria, thus assuring the safety of the finished product. So all these informations, are very useful in achieving food safety and avoid cross contamination. So for bacteria, temperature and time are very critical factors. As you can see from the chart, the growth of bacterial population occurs in a logarithmic or exponential manner, like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, as I mentioned earlier. Under a favorable environmental conditions, such as right pH, optimal temperature, and availability of food, a bacteria can double every 20 minutes. This is important. Please note that it will double every 20 minutes. And if there is one bacterial cell at the time of previous day without proper cleaning and sanitation, by the time you come back next day, and it can lead to more than 1 billion cells with favoring temperature and time conditions. So that's the reason we always repeatedly instruct all the food industry folks, employees to do your best job in cleaning and sanitation, making sure that the bacteria are removed from the food contact surface. That's very important. The food contact surface where the food is prepared, you need to maintain very high hygiene condition. And if there are some bacteria, I'm just talking about one bacteria which forms like 1 billion cells in 10 hours. If there are like couple of bacteria, like hundreds of bacteria, it can lead to a good number of bacterial growth, and that can lead to food poisoning. So now let's understand the common foodborne pathogens associated with various food sources. And here have made a list of all the different category of food products. And for example, plant-based E. coli is pretty common, and salmonella are also pretty common. These two are very important foodborne pathogens that is coming through the plants. In most cases, the raw ingredients are the number one culprit. They carry a lot of bacteria, and of course it's important to clean, wash the raw ingredients before you start using in cooking. That's where you can get rid of most of the bacterial contamination. And also sometimes animal protein, we have E. coli, salmonella, listeria pretty common. And grain, the cereal grains, salmonella, E. coli are pretty common. Again, ready to eat, RT stands for ready to eat product. Listeria, salmonella are pretty common. And in dairy, listeria is the number one pathogen, because the listeria loves water, and most of the dairies are done in dairy operation is done in cold environment. Remember, I told you that listeria loves cold weather, and that's the reason why we have more listeria issues in dairy product. And also in beverage industry also, because of the water and cold condition, listeria plays a very, very important role, and it can lead to cross contamination if things are not controlled properly. So cleaning and sanitation plays a very, very important role, not only at our home, but also at the food establishment to assure the safety of the food products. And in India, the good thing is that we use a lot of spices, that will take care of the most of the bacteria. And the Indian diet is one of the best diet. And the traditional food has a lot of turmeric, the spices and all those ingredients, and they have antibacterial effects, and most of these bacteria will die because of the use of all these spices. And also in India, particularly, the food is thoroughly cooked, and most of the times they are prepared fresh. That's an important thing. Always, it's important to prepare fresh food instead of the stored food, to maintain good microbiome and to have a good sound health. Let's understand the importance of bacteria to humans. Although most bacteria are harmless, a few pathogenic bacteria can cause foodborne illness outbreaks, as I mentioned earlier, leading to huge losses. A foodborne illness occurs when foodborne pathogen produces toxins that results in fever, vomiting, diarrhea, etc. in humans. And how do they make you sick? Usually bacteria will get inside our body through air, water, food. Usually food is the main source of the contamination. Once the bacteria gets into our body, it will start producing toxins. First, it will start producing the more bacteria through the binary fission mode, And once they have a good number of bacteria, they'll start producing toxins. And that's where we get all this headache, vomiting, and diarrhea and fever. So let's understand how to identify bacteria. Suppose if I get a sick, or if I know that I ate some food product previous day, and that's how I got sick. So how do we test and identify these bacteria? So usually we have a different methodology. The number one is microscopic morphology. Usually we have something called gram staining, where gram-positive bacteria will retain some of the dyes. Crystal violet dye. That's the reason, gram staining, colony shapes, motility. I remember I told you about, a bacilli rod shape, cocci round shape. All those things really important to understand. And sometimes we have to do a biochemical test, aerobic, anaerobic, pH, growth condition, temperature, oxygen requirement. All those things really important. Of course, right now, at present, PCR, polymerase chain reaction, is very popular, and it uses DNA probes to identify particular bacteria, and it is very specific. Previously, we had a hard time with the microscopic morphology and physiological biochemical characteristics. Sometimes things could go wrong. We would identify, wrong bacteria. But now we have a PCR, which is most popular, rapid, accurate method. And in fact, in our lab, we are also using the new technology called impedance-based technology, where we can identify bacterial pathogens within 45 minutes of time. Right now, PCR is the most popular one, but still it takes 2.5 to 3 hours. But in order to have a PCR reaction, we need to have a pre-culture. It takes another 24 hours. So basically 24 to 36 hours of time duration is needed to identify, the bacteria. But yes, thanks to the technology, particularly PCR reaction, that helps to identify precise bacteria. And that's where we can start giving, antibiotics or, further treatments to make sure that, person is recovered from the infection. That's all I have about, the bacteria. Now let's talk about the fungi kingdom. Sometimes I use the term molds because that's the common term we use for fungi in America. So these are mostly multicellular, like, the human beings, we have multicellular, right? Body is made up of multi-cells, unlike bacteria, which is single cell. And yeast is a good example, that comes under the fungi kingdom. And fungi are very diverse and ubiquitous, similar to bacteria. You can find them in, water, air, soil, plants, everywhere. You can find fungi. And there are more than 100,000 species of fungi have been identified. But most of the fungi are heterotrophs. That means they depend on other living organisms for survival. For example, the plants and animals, they secrete enzymes, and they, decompose other plant and, animal remains, and they get food from, the dead animals and, plants product. In fact, they play very important role. The decomposition, is very important. Otherwise, it's very difficult to, have a nutrient cycle. So in forest, most of the woods, leaves, fruits, everything, including the animals remains, everything is decomposed. Fungi plays a very important role in a decomposition nutrient cycle. So let's understand the life cycle of fungi. The most fungal life cycle starts with a tiny spore released by fully grown fungi after the reproductive phase. And these spores are very tiny in size and are lightweight in nature. And it can move from one place to another place, of course, with the vectors or through air. So air can also lead to the fungal contamination. So we have to be careful with that. That's why we always say that do a good risk analysis and make sure you are using a good quality water, good quality raw ingredients, and have a good cleaning and hygiene practices to manufacture healthy food. And under favorable conditions, these spores, will start to germinate and grow into a new fungus. Now they move from one place to another places, and and there it will find, if it finds some right food, temperature, and relative humidity, it will start growing. In order to control fungi, relative humidity is one of the important factor. If you reduce relative humidity less than 60%, and then you can control most of the fungi. The mold problem in even inside the house, sometimes you can see that mold growth on the walls and cloth and book and all those things. It's all because of the high relative humidity. Okay, if you decrease the relative humidity to below 60%, you can have a good control on these molds and related problems. So some of the benefits of fungi are, fungi play a major role in decomposition of dead plant and animals, thus play a very good role in nutrient cycle. And some fungi produces chemicals, for example, antibiotics, penicillin, with antibiotic properties, which can be used against bacterial infections. I think we are all using these antibiotics, which are very, very important to maintain good human health in case of infection. And also we eat fungi, best example is mushrooms. Additionally, we use fungi as agents of fermentation in case of, the beer manufacturing, bread manufacturing, that's a very good example. We use yeast to make bread, and also cheese, and sometimes alcoholic beverages. But some fungi, are harmful to humans. Some fungi infect plant and cause significant crop and produce loss. Mostly fungi infect plants. Rarely it infects humans and animals. I think you all agree with me. Now, in case of crop, these fungi attacks the crop. The cereal grains particularly, and in the field. In the field, as I said, fungi are ubiquitous in nature. Soil is a very good source for fungi, and fungi can easily infect a plant, and that's where it gets into the cereal grains and the fruits. Sometimes you might have seen the rotten fruits with mold on the surface, and even the cereal grains with molds infection. So very few fungi causes a problem, but otherwise fungi are play a very important role in nutrient cycle. So let's define the mycotoxins. Few fungi produces toxic chemicals called mycotoxins, and these are secondary metabolites produced by fungi and harmful to animals and humans. Okay, and the word mycotoxin is derived from Greek. Myco means fungus and toxin means poison, and that's why the name mycotoxins. Mycotoxins can be very deadly. In developing and underdeveloping countries where there is a shortage of food grains, and the spoilage of food and fungi can lead to mycotoxin. It can affect kidneys, it can affect the liver. Particularly the high mycotoxin content food product affects the liver. Once the liver get affected, it will affect the overall normal functioning of the body and the health will deteriorate. Excuse me. In most cases, when the person is infected with mycotoxin, usually it takes more time for doctors to analyze and figure it out whether it's because of bacterial infection or mycotoxins. By the time they find out it's because of the mycotoxins, it's too late. Usually, if we have a headache or fever or vomiting or diarrhea, usually doctors will start analyzing the situation based on the bacterial infection. But if it's mycotoxins, then it's important to do the diagnosis as early as possible to make sure they can start the treatment in a proper way. So importance of mycotoxins: most of the fungi species do not produce mycotoxins. Only few will produce mycotoxins. There are over 400 mycotoxins have been identified. However, nearly 30 have been well characterized and considered harmful to animals and humans. Usually what happens, if the grain is moldy grain, or the fruit is bad fruit and vegetables, we'll try to divert that to animals. But animals are very, very sensitive to mycotoxins. It can affect their body functioning. And also, if we supply contaminated grains to cows, sometimes it ends up in the milk. Mycotoxin ends up in the milk also. So unfortunately, most of these mycotoxins are not destroyed in normal cooking conditions. For example, if the food is contaminated with bacteria, if you cook thoroughly, you can get rid of bacteria, but not the mycotoxins. That's the typical characteristic of mycotoxins, because it requires very high temperature to detoxify these mycotoxins. And usually in case of mycotoxin poisoning, there is no clinical treatment to take care of the mycotoxin poisoning. And even drying or adding chemicals and all those things will not take care of mycotoxin poisoning. So prevention is the only best strategy to address molds and mycotoxin poisoning in food. Some important facts: mycotoxins are not visible to eyes. Suppose if somebody is shipping or supplying raw ingredients, it's very, very difficult to make out whether the food is contaminated with the mycotoxins. And not all molds or the fungi grain or moldy grains are contain mycotoxins. And sometimes the food looks good, but it might contain the mycotoxins. So that's another peculiar thing. And not all the mycotoxins are toxic. And unfortunately, these mycotoxins are not uniformly distributed. That's another headache with mycotoxin contaminated food products. So where to collect the food samples to test for mycotoxins, it's really difficult. Suppose if you have a liquid, a milk, if you take sample, if you have a 1,000-liter tank, if you take a 1-liter sample, you can easily make out whether the milk is contaminated or not. But in case of food grains, if you have like 5,000 tons of food grains, and if you take samples, it's very difficult to figure out whether the food grains, 5,000 grains tons grain is contaminated with mycotoxins or not. So because it's not uniformly distributed, only there will be some pockets of grains will be contaminated with mycotoxins. That's another difficult task with handling molds and mycotoxins in food supply chain. So these mycotoxins are resistant to decomposition by cooking. Cooking, as I mentioned earlier, bacterial contaminated product, sometimes cooking thoroughly with high temperature, it will destroy everything, makes the food safe. But in case of mycotoxin contaminated food product, even with cooking, it will not make safe. Freezing, it has no effect on mycotoxins. And again, the digestion, as I mentioned earlier, may end up in milk. Sometimes it's not completely destroyed or digested, so it will end up in milk as aflatoxin M1. And breakdown is often slow, and contaminated crop will remain contaminated throughout the supply chain. What happens, suppose if you have 1 kg 20 parts per billion mycotoxin contaminated grain, and it will remain contaminated throughout the grain supply chain. Sometimes people use the I don't know whether I can say this or not, dilution is the solution for pollution. For example, if you have 1 ton contaminated grain, they will mix with 200 tons of good quality grain. Like, dilution is the solution for pollution, but in most cases this will not work. Technically it is wrong. But as I mentioned earlier, prevention is the best strategy to control molds or mycotoxins. Some of the important mold species and mycotoxins: aflatoxin is the #1 mycotoxin that causes health-related issues, including cancers in humans. And trichothecenes, acrotoxin A, fumaraceins, and zearalenone are other mycotoxins which are very important. But when it comes to mycotoxins, aflatoxin is the most important toxins, and produced by Aspergillus flavus, in green color, greenish yellow color, moldy structure, that's the one that produces aflatoxin. And we have action levels. In America, it's like 20 parts per billion. That's the limit for human consumption. If it crosses 20 parts per billion, then we have to report to the FDA, and the FDA has the authority to take action to recall those products from the market. Losses due to molds and mycotoxin, economic losses, of course, production loss, as I mentioned, it affects the crop in the field, and spoilage during storage, and also heavy losses to farmers and people who are in the food supply chain. And health risk, acute chronic organ toxicities, neurotoxicities, inhibition of fetal development, abortion. High mycotoxin can lead to abortion, and also high mycotoxin contains food can cause cancers, allergens, immunosuppressions. So usually what happens if the bacterial contaminated food product, if you eat it once, we can get infection. But in case of mycotoxins, you need to have a repeated exposure. That means repeated consumption of highly mycotoxin contaminated food product, then you will have all these health related issues. But usually that happens rarely. But these are like big issues in underdeveloped countries where there's a shortage of food grains for humans. So identification, of course, similar to bacteria, we have morphological features. Fungi are identified in the lab with their structure and appearance, like as I mentioned about the color, appearance, hyphal structure. But PCR is the most rapid, popular, and accurate method to identify these fungi. Summary for the fungi. No animal species is immune to acute toxic effects of aflatoxins, including humans. So that's why prevention is the best strategy, and sampling procedure is very critical. It's almost impossible to identify the mycotoxins in food supply chain, and requires an integrated approach. And there is no single treatment to detoxify mycotoxins. And we need to keep the grains. Grains are the most vulnerable to molds and mycotoxin poisoning. Food grains, cereal grains like wheat, corn, millets are most vulnerable to these molds and mycotoxin contamination during storage. That's the reason I always instruct farmers to reduce the relative humidity content and also reduce the moisture content in food grains before you store it for long duration. Like for example, in wheat, we have to reduce the moisture content to below 12%, and then it is safe to store the food grains. So now I'm going to talk about viruses. So a virus is a small infectious agent or particle that replicates only inside the living cells of other organisms. It requires a host for its survival because it has a very minimal mechanism compared to fungi or bacteria. And viruses are found in almost every ecosystem. This is also ubiquitous in nature, in ocean, river, air. It can carry through air. For example, COVID, we had an issue recently, and sneezing, and it can spread through air, and also through food. So cleaning and hygienic practices is the best way to control viruses. I think we are all familiar with that because of the COVID pandemic in the last 3 years. And viruses are much smaller than bacteria and capable of infecting all types of forms. Virus can infect plants, virus can infect animals, virus can infect humans, and also virus can infect bacteria. So in fact, virus play a very good role, important role in maintaining the balance in ecosystem. Otherwise, it's very difficult to control bacterial growth in the nature. So virus play a very important role in maintaining the balance of ecosystem. And viruses can cause cold, flu, and diseases such as measles, SARS, and COVID. So the virus particle consists of 2 or 3 parts. As I mentioned, it's very, it has very minimal mechanisms for survival. The genetic material is stored either in DNA or RNA, a protein code that protects these genetic materials. It's important to protect DNA, right? So that's why it has a very good protein code, and an envelope of lipids, the fatty molecules that surrounds the protein. So it's very simple, the fat layer, protein layer, and DNA. That's it. And whenever it gets into host, if somebody sneezes, if you get a COVID infection, if it gets into lungs, then it will use the host resources for its growth and multiplication, and then infecting the human or animal body. Some of the important foodborne viruses are, in general, the viruses are more resistant than bacteria to environmental factors such as disinfectants, low pH, and heat, and they can survive in harsh environmental conditions. Some of the significant foodborne viruses include noroviruses, the #1 disease-causing viruses in the world, hepatitis A, hepatitis E, rotavirus, astrovirus, and other enteroviruses. So norovirus is very important. I'm going to talk a little bit about norovirus in the next slide. So norovirus is a very contagious virus that causes vomiting and diarrhea in an infected person. And norovirus is the most common foodborne illness agent in the world, responsible for almost 23 million cases annually. And possible source of contaminations are from person to person. It transmitted person to person. That's why good hygienic practice is very important. And shed in human feces, vomiters. Outbreaks can occur in daycares, nursing homes, and cruise ship. In some cases, the one person is infected in cruise ship, usually they carry 3,000 to 4,000 passengers. So it can be, catastrophic, it can infect the whole ship. So in rare cases, people have to bear with all this norovirus infection, because there is no other way to escape from the cruise ship, because you are confined to the ship environment, and it's very close association with the people. So it transmits quickly from person to person through air and physical contact. So we have to be very careful. And anyone can get infected and sick with norovirus by consuming contaminated food. That's why if one food handler is sick, and if he prepares the food, it can contaminate the whole group of people who consumes that food product. And if infected, food handlers should not return to work for 3 days. That's the recommendation. If a sick person, don't go to kitchen, don't prepare the food product, and don't contaminate the finished food product. So that's the instruction we always give to avoid norovirus related foodborne illness outbreak. So prevention of foodborne viruses, it is important to wash hands frequently, rinse fruits and vegetables, excuse me, cook food thoroughly, stay home when sick for 2 days after symptoms stop, avoid preparing food for others when sick for at least 2 days after symptoms stops, or wait until the symptom stops. And food handlers should not return to work for 3 days after the symptoms subside. So these are some of the basic precautions that we need to take in order to control virus-related foodborne diseases. So let's understand who is responsible for food safety. Usually when I teach and train the food professionals, like I ask some same question, who is responsible for food safety? I always get answers like this, right? People will try to, have, forward this responsibility to others. But in reality, achieving food safety requires an integrated approach, and it's everyone's job. Although food manufacturers have more accountability, food safety is a shared responsibility in a farm to fork model. and therefore it's everyone's job. So let's understand what is food safety. At the most basic, food safety refers to handling, storage, processing, preparing, distributing, and storing food in a way to best reduce the risk of consumers becoming sick from foodborne illness. Technically, it is a scientific discipline describing handling, preparing, storing, distribution, and hygienic serving of food in a ways that prevent foodborne illness outbreak. So basically, we have to use, we have to apply science in a way to, like during handling or receiving raw ingredient, during preparation, during storage, distribution, and also the serving is also very important to avoid foodborne illness outbreak. So why food safety is very important? So the data has clearly shown that pathogens have breached their natural reservoirs and are routinely found in common foods causing foodborne illnesses everywhere, not in just America and throughout the world, India, developing countries, everywhere, you can see a lot of foodborne related outbreaks due to common foodborne pathogens. And according to World Health Organization, unsafe food consumption causes 600 million cases of foodborne illness with 420,000 deaths, like 420,000 deaths each year. And although regarded as one of the safest food supply chain, each year 3,000 people die of foodborne illness outbreak in the US. And as a food microbiologist, we always say that all these illnesses, outbreaks, deaths can be 100% preventable. So in most of the cases, the bad preparation, bad handling, unhygienic way of serving food are the main reasons for foodborne illness outbreak. And additionally, tainted food has cost the food industry billions of dollars in recalls, loss in sales, and legal expenses. That's why follow all the recommended guidelines, and store food properly, and keep all the, the cold foods in refrigerated condition. Don't abuse the food for, high temperature or low temperature, and have a good manufacturing practices in place. And most importantly, prepare the food in hygienic way. And also the serving is also very important to make sure that finished product is safe. Let's understand the major routes of transmission of microbes or pathogens that leads to food contamination. There are 6 major routes in which microbes or bacteria enter the food manufacturing facility. The number one is raw ingredients, the number one reason for food contamination. So always procure good quality raw ingredients to make food. And human activities that includes both direct and indirect causes. In most cases, it's because of the human error, because we always recommend to wash hands thoroughly before you enter the food preparation zone. In most of the cases, things can go wrong, and that's why we have this foodborne illness outbreak. And water, contaminated water can lead to foodborne illness outbreak. Air can also lead to food contamination. As I mentioned, the fungal spores can, they are very tiny, lightweight, and easily transmit through air. So contaminated air can also lead to contamination. Vehicles, the forklifts, utensils, chopping board, you need to maintain that in a very good hygienic condition, clean and sanitize, always do a good job so that it will not lead to cross contamination. And the last one is pest management is also very, very important, whether it's be at home or in food manufacturing facility. Pest control, that means controlling cockroaches, flies, or stored product insects are very, very important, because these carry a lot of bacteria and can lead to for food product adulteration. So pest management is also very, very important. Raw ingredients, procuring raw ingredients to human activities, to good quality water, air, and utensils, and pest management plays a very, very important role in assuring the safety of the finished food product. So let's learn 4 steps to food safety. Cook food thoroughly, which I repeated, several times, and separate raw ingredients with finished cooked or food products. So that's very important to avoid cross-contamination. Clean, always clean the raw ingredients wherever possible, and always keep refrigerated foods in a fridge to avoid bacterial growth. And for many different types of foods, the cooler temperature can inhibit the growth of bacteria and help your food stay safer for longer period of times. So these are some of the 4 important tips that I would like to give in order to make sure that finished product is safe. Now let's understand the human microbiome, the role of microbes in human health. As you all know, microbes are ubiquitous in nature. The surface of the human body, inside and out, for example, the skin, mouth, and the intestines are covered in millions of individual microorganisms that don't do any harm to us. In most of the cases, these bacteria inside our body, they are living in a symbiotic relationship, not causing any damages, not causing any diseases. In fact, they help to protect us from becoming infected with harmful microbes. They are known as the normal body flora or human microbiome. The human microbiome are the microorganisms which are dynamic in nature and change in response to a host of environmental factors such as exercise, diet, medication, and other exposures. The number of normal bacterial cells that live on the body is in the region of 10 to the power of 13, which is 10 times more than human body cells. According to some data, we have more bacteroids. We use the term bacteroids than human cells. I think we have 10 times more than human cells. Typically 10 to the power of 12 human cells we have, and we have 10 to the power of 13 bacteroids in our body that play a very significant role in maintaining the health of our body. Usually microorganisms make up about like 1 to 3%. Suppose if I'm weighing 100 kgs, then there will be up to 3 kgs of bacteria. My body is made up of almost like 3 kgs of bacteria. So that's about in the human microbiome. Let's understand their role and how they help to maintain good health. According to studies, the healthy gut microbiota and the intestinal microbial balance is closely relevant to human disease and health. Compared with other regions of the body, the human gastrointestinal tract, in short, GI tract, contains an abundant microbial community and plays a significant role in human health. Extensive studies have been performed to reveal the important relationship between the gut microbiota and basic human biological processes. For example, current advances have shown that human microbiota is closely involved in nutrient extraction, metabolism, and immunity. For example, the high amount of fiber, if you eat more of leafy vegetables, we do not have the enzyme to digest those things. In fact, bacteria helps us to digest those things and absorb the nutrients. The biosynthesis of bioactive molecules such as vitamins, amino acids, and lipids are also highly dependent on the gut microbiota. So let's understand how microbiota benefit body. Microbiota stimulate the immune system, break down potentially toxic food compounds, and synthesize certain vitamins and amino acids, including the B vitamins and vitamin K. For example, the key enzymes needed to form the vitamin B12 are only found in bacteria, not in plants and animals. We don't have those enzymes. It's only coming through the bacteria, symbiotic bacteria that we have in our digestive system, like the GI tract. And also like sugars like table sugar and lactose, like a milk sugar, are quickly absorbed in the upper part of the small intestine, but more complex carbohydrates such as starches and fibers are not easily digested and may travel to lower large intestine. And there, the microbiota helps to break down these compounds with their digestive enzymes, and thus helps our body to absorb the uh, nutrients. The fermentation of indigestible fiber causes the production of the short chain fatty acid that can be used by the body as a nutrient source, but also play an important role in muscle function and possibly the prevention of chronic diseases, including certain cancers and bowel disorders. Clinical studies have shown that short chain fatty acid may be useful in the treatment of uh, colitis, Crohn's disease, and antibiotic associated diarrhea. This chart shows the relationship between human dysbiosis and potential diseases in humans. As I mentioned earlier, most of these bacteria live in symbiotic relationship with human body. They get a shelter in our body. In return, they also help us to produce many vitamins like B12 and amino acid, helps in breakdown of amino acid from complex carbohydrates, and helps the body to absorb those amino acids and play a vital role in human health. But in case of dysbiosis, that means not living in harmonious condition because of our diet habit, exercise habit, eating habit particularly, and it can lead to so many diseases. If there is a significant change in human biota due to other diet habits, it can cause diseases such as cancer, heat diseases, inflammatory bowel diseases, chronic kidney diseases, etc. Hence, it is important to maintain a healthy microbiome is to eat a range of fresh, whole foods. That means eat less processed food. The more the processed food, it will affect the microbiota in our body, then leading to so many other complications. So it's always recommended to eat a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, whole foods, mainly from plant sources like fruits, veggies, legumes, beans, and whole grains. In fact, our Indian diet is really good. It has a mixture of all these things, predominantly whole foods. They play a very important role in maintaining healthy microbiota in our body. This chart shows the importance of eating a diverse diet rich in whole foods that can lead to a diverse microbiome, which is beneficial for your body. In fact, it can act as the probiotic, prebiotic, thus helps body to maintain a good health, fight against other pathogenic bacterial invention. Summary and conclusion. After decades of research, we have gradually established a new role of microbiota in health and disease. It is now confirmed that microbiota can affect almost all aspects of the host. It's not just one aspect, physical, mental health, while its dysbiosis is related to wide spectrum of diseases. Thanks to advanced research technologies, we are able to closely examine how microbiota maintain human health and contribute to pathogenesis. The study of microbiota is mainly focused on the bacterial component. When I say microbiota, it includes fungi, virus, protozoa, bacteria, right? But right now, the research mainly focuses on bacteria, and still additional research is needed to understand the role of fungi and virus in maintaining the human health. In addition, while the microbiota dysbiosis is often observed in disease states, the causative role of microbiota is yet to be established. Of course, although we understood a lot of things about microbiota in relation to human health, but still so many unanswered questions need to be resolved in the coming days. Your gut bacteria or microbiome are extremely important to maintain sound health condition. Studies have clearly established that a disrupted microbiome can lead to numerous chronic diseases The best way to maintain a healthy microbiome is to eat a range of fresh whole foods. If possible, eat majority of foods mainly from plant sources like fruits, veggies, legume, beans, and whole grains. And wherever possible, please eat whole foods, because the food is being processed. Processed means you're adding a lot of fat, a lot of sugar and salt. And usually these things can affect the microbiota. And too much of saturated fat, added sugar, or sodium can increase the risk of developing a chronic diseases, because you're affecting the natural microbiota inside your body. At this junction, it is unclear if the benefits of a vegetarian diet on the gut microbiome are due to the lack of a meat-based diet. And I'm not an expert to comment on the benefits of vegetarian versus non-vegetarian diet, but at the same time, it is very clear that eating whole foods, a lot of fruits and vegetables, legumes and grains helps in maintaining diverse microbiota in our body, which is very much needed to maintain a sound health. I think that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for your presence and patience. And let me know if there are any questions. I'll be more than happy to, answer those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kant, and for your wonderful presentation. We understood that there is a lot of science behind the kind of food that we are all eating. And this preliminary knowledge is important in the choice of the foods and how it is going to work in our body and all that. We have got beautiful information and very much useful and necessary knowledge. So we have our Dr. Gopichand here. I think he will make some comment or some remark on the talk, because they're all doctors. And
Sure,
so Gopichand, are you there? And would you talk
Yes,
something?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am here.
Yeah, please put some weight.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah. We are here.
Yeah. So, it was a very good talk at the outset, I should say. Now, I would like to make some my own assertions regarding this food safety and health. What is food safety is basically the doctor has told about more about the medical aspects. I would like to speak something about the social aspects of it. So in India, the central government, the government of India has passed a Food Safety Act, and accordingly, the food commissioners have been appointed in various states. So they will look into the safety of the food that is supplied to the general public. Similarly, I'm sure even in America, they have the Food and Drug Administration, which will look into the aspects of the food safety and etc. Why in India, in India, we are looking into the prevention of adulteration of the food. More importantly, that is like they mix the butter with something, they mix with tea powder with sawdust, and say they mix they sell pepper along with the mix with the papaya seeds. So these are the things which they would like to prevent. And more importantly, the government is concerned about the food that is being supplied in hotels, food that is being supplied to dignitaries whenever they visit. So that is the thing that they are more concerned, because there the government may fall or government may get a bad name and all that. And earlier also from the time immemorial, even the kings and some of the kings of the Hindu kings and as well as the Mughals, they were very, very particular about the food being intaken. So they used to make somebody else to eat their food which is being served, and then only they used to eat, because they were getting feared that it maybe get poisoned or something like that. So from the time immemorial, the food is given a very important, and food basically it's a basic need, and it is a government responsibility also to provide a good food for the citizens. because most of the governments is a welfare state, whether it is a democratic government or a communist government or a kingdom. The welfare of the citizen is the most important, and food forms one very important things. So in that way, we have a legislation to control the safety of the food and etc. And coming to the economic aspects, food industry is a very big industry. It's a big industry all over the world. We see the McDonald's, we see the Subway, and we see the Sarvana Bhavan in India, Kamath, Pai Hotels. They are all the chain of food chain suppliers. And not only that, we have a lot of charity programs also in India, especially the temples. They supply food to the devotees, and some charity organization they supply food. And in all those things, the not only the regarding the biological or the medicinal aspects of food, sabotage is also very important. We have seen recently in a house, some people, especially in recently, I read in the newspaper that in London, in one of the restaurants, they used to mix the food with human excreta. Ultimately, that fellow was arrested in the London police. These are very, very recent things. And in in earlier days also, there is a famous thing called Typhoid Mary in England. She, transmitted the typhoid thing to so many people because she was carrier of the typhoid bacteria in her intestine. So these are the things. This sabotage is very, very important, because especially important so when the dignitaries are visiting, like prime ministers, presidents, important ministers, bureaucrats, when they are coming from some other place and when they are taking food, their safety becomes extremely important. And the government is, wherever they are, the dignitary is staying in the hotel and all, the food safety is taken care of first. Who is cooking, from where their food is being supplied, what is being cooked, what is being served, how it is served, etc., etc. And as you said, it is not only in the consumption of food, even in water also. We'll get, in fact, because in earlier days, even the soldiers were supplied with chlorine tablets, because whenever they don't have water, whenever they are fighting in the battle, and when to purify the water, the chlorine tablets were supplied, and they used to put the one tablet into the glass of water, and the water gets purified. That sort of thing. So, and it's as I told, it's a big industry. Among that's how the safety factor comes very, very important in this. And in our culture also, we say that milk is a very easily digestible, and we equate milk to amruta. That is why we compare cow to the mother. That's why cow is called Gomata, because it gives milk. It's very most easily digestible, and it's a whole food. It has got vitamins. It has got carbohydrates, fat, everything in an appropriate way. It comes almost equivalent to the human beings. So we take milk as an amruta. And one more thing I just wanted to add is this. What should I say? The food industry, the misuse of the food industry, the economic aspect of it. Many of the companies, they are supplying the energized foods. As earlier also we were talking about the food and all that, about the diabetes, and we see how these energized foods are being supplied, where they'll give only sugar, no vitamins, no minerals in that like Coke and etc. Energy drinks. They are all junk food. They don't supply the whole food. It's only a supply of energy and all that. How the people are being cheated and people are being misused or misdirected, especially the youth, and consumption of it leads to a lot of diabetes, overweight, and all those things. So food is a very big this thing. It involves the entire community. It's not only just nutritionists and physicians and treating this thing. It involves the government. It involves the bureaucrats. It involves the supply chain. It involves the farmers. So many things. It is a basic need. Food, shelter, and clothing is a basic need of the human beings. So it is a very important, it is a huge topic, and time is not enough to go into the different aspects. And I would like to thank Professor Prabhakar for giving me this opportunity to say something. This is what I just want to add in this thing, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the speaker, sir. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Dr. Gopichand. I think you raised a good point, and the food safety, food security, and food defense equals food protection. These are very, very important. And economic adulteration is a big issue in
Yes,
in
yes,
most
yes.
of the countries. I think we need to make sure that
They are making a lot of misadvertisement, making money. The economics
correct.
is
Yeah.
the principal driving factor rather than the nutritional aspect and the health of the individuals. So many, and these days the sabotage is very, very important. It is happening in some of the temples also here in India. I don't know, maybe it might be happening at other places also. I told you about the London, this thing. It's just
Yeah.
a few months back it has happened. So maybe Food and Drug Administration is very strict. I know you are aware, and so America is got a very strong, stringent measures. Even in airport, they check what all they are bringing, and if they don't like it, they will just throw it into the dustbin and all that. So we keep hearing all those things. That way, some of developed countries are, but in spite of it, there are people, there are black sheep in the crowd. So we have to be careful. Sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving
Very
this.
nice of you to, and it's a wonderful talk, good analysis.
Thank you,
And
sir.
I think we have got Prasad from Atlanta to give some vote of thanks. And though he's software and he's connected with all our Veda and all that. So now Prasad will provide his comments and then thanks.
Thank you, Prabhakar Garu. Hari Om. First of all, I would like to thank Kantha Channaiah Garu for giving this wonderful speech. At the onset, like when I first heard Chiranjeevi Jyotiraditya as well as Vasan Garu giving the Annasuktam as well as the Bhagavad Gita chanting, I felt like there's a good beginning for the subject. But then I felt like, I don't know if you guys talked internally, but your commentary was really, that was a prologue for your commentary. So you went through each of those chapters that Chiranjeevi Jyotiraditya actually spoke or chanted, and then you gave a wonderful meaning to each of those slokas. And this is very critical, important, because for kids, if you say chant Bhagavad Gita, it would have been, okay, why are you asking me to chant all this? But this is a scientific view of, you put together all that, like the fat Tom, everything that you mentioned, right? Those are just the meaning of the shlokas that Chiranjeevi Jyotiraditya actually chanted. So thanks for excellent speech, as well as going through that. And thank you, Gopichand Garu, for extra commentary that you added, which is practically that is happening across various fields. So, and also like Suniti Garu for the recording, for the invoking the Ganapati and the song. Thank you all. And with that, I'll give it to Prabhakar Garu. Or do you want me to say the Sahana?
Yeah, very nice. And I think because food is a important subject, because it is giving you health, it is giving you disease, it is giving you everything. And so the choice of food is most important. And that is being practiced in India by all people, Brahmana, Vaishya, Kshatriyas. Whenever they start eating, they should make prayer to Paramatma that whatever food, whatever kind of food you are taking, it must be affectionate to you, not infectious to you. Therefore, we make a prayer, Chitraya Namaha, Chitraguptaya Namaha, Yamaya Namaha, Sarvabhutebhyo Namaha. We remember Yama also because he is our protector and also annihilator. So Yama is also remembered before. So some such traditional, religious, and also healthy practices are there. And another important thing is whenever we want to consume the food, we are advised to sip little water before, because our stomach is a fire furnace. and it's burning. Hunger is the fire. So put some water, a little lubrication, and then take food, and again put some water, pidhanam, closing up the holes. So we have got the beginning and coverage for that. So like that, regarding food, our Vedas and success literature has given a lot of cautions and precautions and choices, selections and all that. But in spite of all that, we have very good science behind food products, behind preparations. A sample of it, our Lakshmi Kantha Channaiah has given us. And so in future, because Nada Veda Adhyayana Kendra is not just only one aspect, but it has to have a multivarious or a multidisciplinary things. Therefore, today we have a wonderful talk. Thank you very much. And now I ask Sivalingaya to just say the Shanti Mantra and we conclude this program with all thanks to everybody. Sivalingaya, all right? Om. Everybody, go to
Sahano bhunaktu sahavi karavavare tejasvinavadhi tamastamavitvishavare Om Shanti 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 Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Markaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhave Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu Sri Vasudeva Arpanamastu Sri Veda Purusha Ashirvadostu Om Tat Sat Hari Om.
Thank you very much. So,
Thank you, sir.
and we have a nice, thank you, Babu, for all
Thank
the
you. Thank you.